changes pretty fast.
Oh, does it? Okay, that's good to know that's ahead. Right now, we're in the mommy-daddy phase.
Okay. All right. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education for Monday, December 19th, 2022. And the first thing we'll do is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Next will be to review and approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Can I get a motion? Julie, second. Erica? All in favor? Julie? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next will be the approval of the minutes. First, can I get a motion to approve the December 5th, 2022 minutes? Katrina, second. Brendan, all in favor? Next, can I get a motion to approve the December 12th, 2022 minutes? Phil, second. Penny, all in favor? Thank you. All right, we'll move on to comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. If the speaker would just provide their name and street, that would be appreciated. Does anyone want to make a public comment? Okay.
Hi, Lauren Connolly Nussbaum, 65 Whiffletree Lane. I'm here tonight to ask that when you get to the time in the meeting to vote on the 24-25 calendar, you not add Columbus Day back into the school calendar as a holiday and a break from school. I have a number of reasons why I think the kids and our teachers and staff should spend time in school on Columbus Day. And I'll just give you this one example, and that is my grandfather, John Henry Murphy Jr., who I never met, was a paratrooper in World War II. He was wounded twice, awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. He was released from the hospital just in time to jump into the Battle of the Bulge, and was truly a war hero. Every year on Veterans Day, my 3 girls go into South School in Sacs and they tell this story and they share my grandfather, who I never met, with their classmates and their teachers. And there's such a deep learning that we get from one another. And that's why I would urge you to keep Columbus Day an in-school learning day, because there's such a deep learning when we tackle our country's history. And we can learn so much if we work together and move forward together. And in that vein, I just want to thank each and every one of you on the Board of Ed tonight, whether or not we agree or disagree. And I want to thank the administrators here tonight. Whether or not we agree or disagree, you give unbelievable amounts of your own personal time. Some of you paid and many of you unpaid. And those of you who are paid, I don't think you're paid enough. But I just want to thank all of you and wish you all a wonderful holiday and a wonderful holiday season. I know in my home, we feel grateful every day to be part of New Canaan and to be able to send our kids to such a phenomenal public school system. So happy holidays. Thanks.
I'm Alex Sullivan. I'm on St. George Lane. I'm not going to start this as saying, as an Italian woman, debates don't care about your feelings or what your background is. Debates only care about facts. So here are some facts. Fact, Native Americans were constantly warring with each other over territory. They would scalp babies and mothers' heads and send them to rival clans in baskets during war, among other horrible war crimes. Fact, Christopher Columbus was an Italian who discovered the North American area for the Europeans. Fact, Europeans were savvier warriors than Native Americans and conquered them by heinous, heinous acts, similar to and also different from how Native Americans tried to conquer each other. Fact, without Christopher Columbus, we would not have had the American Revolution. Without the American Revolution, we would not have had the Industrial Revolution. Fact, the Industrial Revolution and the technological advances thereafter raised billions of people around the world out of abject poverty and continue to today. And that is something to celebrate. You can cancel Columbus if you want to. Who cares about the few Italians that are here in New Canaan? Anyway, right? I plan to teach my kids whatever you don't and unteach them whatever I disagree with. I suggest others who are having mental breakdowns about Columbus do the same and move on with their lives rather than waste the sport's time. But just know, one day, someone's going to come for your holiday. One day, Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah will be canceled because someone thinks Jewish people are racist or commit heinous acts against Palestinians. Actually, you're already starting to see this on university campuses here in the US. One day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. will be canceled because someone is mad he believed in a colorblind society, not a color-obsessed one. And when that day comes, because at the rate we are going, it is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when, I will be standing here asking, well, where were you when they canceled my holiday? Where were you when they canceled Columbus? I will leave you with this poem from Martin Lee Muller in 1946. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Thank you.
Good evening, Yolanda Gerard, Cross Street. Growing up on the west side of Stamford in a predominantly Italian neighborhood, Columbus Day was a day that we all look forward to. It was a day in which family and friends would gather and celebrate Italian-American heritage. We would indulge in delicious food, great music, and tell stories of Columbus to the younger generations. This was very inclusive to all ethnic backgrounds. Adding Columbus Day to the New Canaan Public School holiday schedule would include the celebration of Italian immigrants who helped to build the wonderful country that we live in. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to change the subject. I'm Patricia Spagani. I live on Marvin Ridge Road. I lived in town for 30 years. I'm here with my husband, Joel Reynolds. We're very fortunate to live in this town and contribute as taxpayers. We don't have any children, so I've never experienced the school system directly or participated in a board meeting before, but thank you for inviting public comments. Okay, so my point. Joel and I have been members and board members of the Town Players of New Canaan, which is the community theater here at the Powerhouse. We perform our productions here at the Powerhouse Theater at the other side of Waveney Park. In February, we are producing Ordinary People to support the community and be part of the conversation on mental health. So I wanted to just bring that to the awareness of the board and to support the program that Dr. Gerber and Bethany Zara are going to speak about. The Town Players is very pleased to offer one of our 9 productions in February as a fundraiser to support the mental health initiative that the town in Silver Hill commissioned last year, which is the urgent assessment program they're going to talk about. So I just wanted to voice my support, our support, the Town Player support for that production, and thank you for your consideration.
Any further public comment? All right, we can move on to reports and recognition.
Great. Well, it is my privilege to introduce to the board tonight both Dr. Gerber and Bethany Zara. Bethany is our Director of Health and Human Services. Dr. Gerber works over at Silver Hill, and both of them together, along with Dr. Bliss, folks from town, other folks from Silver Hill, others have put together a program that they're going to share with you tonight called the New Canaan Urgent Assessment Program. Please. This is usually your introduction music as I go in a talk, so I keep going until you get there. But I can talk a lot, though. But I am thrilled to bring this to the board and to share information about this really visionary, I think, groundbreaking program. I've been talking about it quite a bit with my colleagues in surrounding districts. I know that there could be some opportunity for partnerships with some of the other districts, and I really am so grateful for the concept but actually seeing it come to life and having this program in place to the benefit of our students, our families, and our entire community. And Bethany and Dr. Gerber have been instrumental in this work, as have many others, I know, but there are no better representatives than the two of you to give us an update tonight. So thank you for coming.
Great, thank you. So I'm Bethany Zaro, St. John Place in New Canaan. Thank you for letting me speak here tonight. So during the past few years, Human Services has expanded their outreach and education efforts to address public health issues specific to New Canaan. And the most striking uptick that we've experienced in the department with the caseworkers has been a greater need for behavioral health case management. Through New Canaan Community Foundation's assessment process that was done a couple of years ago or pre-COVID and then brought into post-COVID, it was also reconfirmed by them that the disparity exists between the time someone expresses a need for mental health support and when that individual actually receives the appropriate care. It can be a while. Seeking a qualified medical health professional who is scheduling up to 6 weeks out for a new patient consultation leaves greater chance for that pivotal moment in one's life, and we want to decrease the chance of that turning into a crisis moment. So with this information, the town, hearing this from the foundation, the town approached the foundation and Silver Hill Hospital, and we began to brainstorm and look for answers. And from those sessions, plus a one-year grant awarded through the ARPA funds, the New Canaan Urgent Assessment Program officially launched in July 7th of 2022. And the assessment program it is a public-private partnership that we call it, and it has been it's been vital in terms of providing that, bridging that gap between recognizing someone is in need of mental health care and the critical time frame necessary to achieve the most positive outcome for that person and their family. So Dr. Gerber from Silver Hill, he is the president and medical director, and he's going to give you more details about the program. There's a quantitative and qualitative aspect to it, and we have definitely tried to keep the quantitative in there, although the qualitative sometimes is difficult to assess, but there are many, many positive outcomes coming from this. And I just wanted to say that our next step is the sustainability of financially supporting this program at the caliber in which it functions. The town is reaching out to community entities who are also interested in solidifying the program's validity past our fiscal year 23, which ends at the end of June. And the town players of New Canaan, as Patricia pointed out, that is a strong, strong example of partnering to support the cause. And this nonprofit, as she explained, has generously agreed to hold a fundraiser in conjunction with their February production of Ordinary People. So the proceeds will benefit the New Canaan Urgent Assessment Program, and this really means a lot in terms of keeping this mental health initiative, wellness initiative alive. So as we look for avenues to progress, to continue this progression, just please be mindful in terms of the community stakeholders and how they can help. So now Dr. Gerber is going to go into the meat and potatoes of this. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Bethany, and thank you for having me here tonight to talk about this program, which is a real labor of love for a wide range of people who've been instrumental in making this happen. And what I come back to again and again, and hopefully you'll get a bit more of a sense of tonight is the extent to which this has been a community effort and continues to be a community effort, and really is an example, I think, of how New Canaan cares about its citizens in really quite an extraordinary way, and that, of course, includes our school children as well. But I'm going to start actually with a little bit of even older history than Bethany was giving, because many of you, I imagine, are aware that Silver Hill Hospital has been in New Canaan a long time. It was founded in 1931. And the principle upon which it was founded, there were two. One was that hospitals that were devoted to mental health care and addiction care didn't need to be far away from everything else. That people with mental illness and addiction were just like the rest of us. They're parts of our families. And having them within our community and welcoming them into our community and helping them like other citizens is in the best interests of those individuals as well as our own. That was not common practice before Silver Hill and its immediate ancestor, Austin Riggs, were founded. But that was a new idea, that you could build a hospital right in the middle of a town, just as Silver Hill is. But the other idea is that access to care should be available to everyone. And what's often lost to history is the fact that the first community mental health clinic in Fairfield County was on the campus of Silver Hill Hospital, and that building survives to this day. So even though sometimes our reputation over the years has been a little bit more about celebrities or other things, in fact, that was not the founding principle, and it's not the principle that really I think is most important for our existence as a hospital. The most important principle is that we care for everybody and that we work with our neighbors, and that, of course, is New Canaan. So in that light, let me tell you a little bit about what we've been able to achieve in a remarkably short time. So based on what Bethany told you about and the support of the government, including our first selectman, Kevin Moynihan, who was also instrumental in getting us that ARPA funding, we set up a way that everybody who is referred to our program could receive a comprehensive in-person evaluation within 48 hours. That's very different than what is available out in the community. As Bethany mentioned, it's much more common for people to report, and they were reporting to us, being told that the next available appointment was weeks, if not months away. And we said that's not good enough. But the other thing that we heard is even in families where there were the resources to, if necessary, pay for these services, having to pay was a barrier. And when people thought, you know what, I don't really need to go right now. Why don't I wait a week? Why don't I wait a month? Why don't I wait until there's something available that's less expensive? That often was an excuse because it's hard to deal with these illnesses, and it's hard for the individual and it's hard for family members. So what we decided was we were going to eradicate that barrier, and we were going to say that everybody who comes to this program comes for free. We do bill insurance where we can, but regardless of whether there's a copay, regardless of whether insurance covers or not, if you're a member of the New Canaan community, you show your driver's license or your family member's driver's license. If you live in New Canaan, you don't pay a dime. And that was also very, very important to us. So as Bethany mentioned, the program started in early July. We intentionally kept it a little bit quiet as we ramped up. But to date, we've had over 60 phone calls and people asking for assessments, and that's led to almost 50 in-person assessments. Every in-person assessment consists of 3 hours of in-person availability. The first hour being with a trained child and adolescent psychiatrist. I happen to be a child and adolescent psychiatrist myself, so I can tell you this is near and dear to my heart. And sometimes people say, well, why do I need a child and adolescent psychiatrist if you're an adult? And the answer is because we were all kids at one point. So whether you're a kid, a child or adolescent now, or whether you're an adult, your childhood and your adolescence matters. So we have somebody who's wonderfully trained, a guy named Dr. Penquay, and he sees every patient who comes in, and we schedule them at the maximum of 48 hours. Everybody we've gotten back to within 24 hours, and every single person who's wanted it has received an appointment within 48 hours. We're very proud of that statistic. But after Dr. Penquay, we also have a wonderful social worker named Jules Jonas, who works collaboratively with the patient, the family, and Dr. Penquay to make sure that not only is the assessment completed and we investigated all the different possibilities of what's going on, but very importantly, that the next steps are well defined. An evaluation is only as good as the potential for follow-up treatment. And as I imagine many of you have had this experience of going to doctors and of all kinds, It's one thing to be told this is the problem. It's another thing to have an appointment to see the next person to make sure that that gets taken care of. Too many balls get dropped. Too many times an initial assessor says, you should do this, here's a phone number to call, and then that person has no availability, or they never call back, or they don't take the right insurance. So in every single case, all 50 cases, we ensured that there was a follow-up appointment scheduled and that a warm handoff was done, meaning not only do you go home knowing exactly when and where to go, but we as Silver Hill Hospital staff have spoken to that person. They know what we found, and they know why they need to follow up with this individual. One of the things we heard a lot during the New Canaan Community Fund assessment and the discussions was that there weren't enough providers, that there weren't enough people out there who were willing to see our patients. And that's strange, actually, because this is a very well-resourced area in terms of providers. And what it turns out is it's not the numbers. The problem was the handoff wasn't there. So we make sure that handoff happens. We work closely with the town. We work closely with Bethany and her staff in any case that we don't immediately have someone, and we've never failed to this date of getting somebody an immediate follow-up appointment. So we're very, very proud of that. I'm going to tell you now just a little bit about the numbers that Bethany mentioned, because I think it's helpful, particularly for this group, to understand the important role that our schools, and especially Susan Bliss, play in terms of this partnership with our assessment service. So of those 50 patients that we assessed, 19% of them were 12 and below. 45% of them were between the ages of 13 and 17. So if we think about school age going up through 17, right away you've got 64%. Over half of the individuals we have seen and assessed were of school age. 14% were young adults, 18 to 26, 18% between 27 and 60, and 4% 60 and above. So while there is quite a range, we've seen them all the way from very young to much older, there is a heavy concentration in our school system. I imagine that doesn't surprise any of you. Childhood and adolescence are the times that virtually all mental illness develops. That's because that's when the brain is developing. So it is no coincidence that this is when these problems are showing up. It's also no coincidence because your school system, your staff, has the wonderful resources to identify when there are difficulties. But no school system, nor should any school system, be the last stop in that mental health journey, meaning there's no way you could have the expertise to do all the treatments yourself. That's why you need a partner like Silver Hill to do that next assessment, and the partnership of the broader community to do that treatment. So really we're working together to do it. When we looked at the numbers of presenting complaints, again, it was not a surprise. 56% of the individuals who presented to us suffered primarily from depression, an additional 18% from anxiety, 9% from substance use, 11% from mood dysregulation, and 2% from psychosis. So again, a broad range of problems. This is what necessitates a very expert assessment. On the other hand, not surprisingly, we see the bulk of problems with depression and anxiety. As Bethany already mentioned, we're living in a time of unprecedented mental health needs. Things were not great, I would say, before the pandemic, and since the pandemic, they've gotten steadily worse. We see it in our families, we see it in our friends, we see it in our schools. They're not insurmountable. Treatment is available, but one has to access that treatment, and that's why our program is here. Referrals to the program have been, again, from a range, but I want to single out the school system as being one of our most important referrals. 33% of the patients we've seen, the referral directly came through the schools. Interestingly, another very important referral source was moms of New Canaan. Not a surprise to me, knowing that moms really are the ones who identify these things in most cases. And so working together, the schools, the moms, the town of New Canaan itself, and some of the more local mental health providers who've identified individuals, that's where our patients come from. So we are committed to continuing to do this. We anticipate by the end of the year, because we're even if you consider that we had a slow start, we're less than halfway through, we're going to have seen over 100 patients through this system. members of the New Canaan community. We are looking into potential partnerships with other towns, but I have to say, our first obligation, our first love, was really the people of New Canaan, and most especially the young people of New Canaan, for whom we think these services are so important. I think it was said earlier, but this, I think, Brian, you mentioned it, this is unusual. There are no other communities I know of that offer this kind of service, this high quality, for free. And I think we should all be very proud of that. It's been an honor for me and an honor for Silver Hill to be part of this, and I look forward to any questions people had and continuing this service on in the future.
And I just wanted to add what Andrew said, in terms of Silver Hill working with the families and the clients. Human Services, there's a HIPAA policy. We do not know who these people are. We give referrals. When their care goes over to Silver Hill, it's not discussed at all with the town. Just know that the confidentiality stays within Silver Hill, and we might be asked, Human Services, if someone is unable to pay, we have resources that they can call to get the help they need, and so we give them the resource. We don't hear of the name. It's all confidential, but we do have the resources. A lot of Silver Hill is self-pay, and they are now, getting through this program. People that take the assessment, they do need help, and the funds are limited. And so that is where Human Services comes in and giving the resources to Silver Hill to pass on. So I just want you to know the confidentiality is definitely intact. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions?
Sure.
Erica?
Hi, thank you so much. I mean, it's so amazing to hear about our ability to serve the community with this program. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the students that you've served, maybe 30 or so students. If you've learned anything that you've been able to come back to the school system and say, hey, we notice a pattern here. Is there anything that you've been able, or that you anticipate you'd be able to bring back that we can use as useful information, because we are interacting with these kids before you see them?
It's a wonderful question, and I really appreciate your thoughtfulness about that. And it strikes me that it's worth spending a good amount of time on that. I can't resist, though, offering a little bit of my thoughts about that. I mean, the first thing I want to say is nothing that we've heard is unusual from the sense of adolescence. In other words, I wouldn't say, I've worked with adolescents my whole career. I've worked in the Upper West Side of Manhattan and in Massachusetts and in various parts of New York. And I can tell you that the kids here in New Canaan suffer from many of the same disorders that others do. So it's not different. But what I think we are seeing all over the country, increasingly with the pandemic, is anxiety about their future. And you could say, well, who hasn't been anxious about the future? But I think things are different now. I think there's something about the pandemic and something about the state of the culture nowadays that has kids worried that they won't be able to achieve the things that their parents and previous generations. And I think that's affecting our kids. Not all, right? Every kid is different. There are kids who are more vulnerable than others. I don't mean to say this is everyone, but we hear about this. The second thing is I think we are seeing that the availability of ways to harm themselves is greater now than it has been in the past. I think the access to certain substances is greater than it used to be. And it has become, unfortunately, and whether you blame social media for this or some other factor, it has become more common for kids to contemplate and engage in self-harming behavior, whether that be cutting or some other form of harming themselves. Again, I don't mean to say this is all kids. Of course it's not. We see the kids who are struggling, so I wouldn't want you to generalize this. But we see kids struggling with that. And why are they doing that? I think part of it is the anxiety, but part of it is really struggling with what I would call their emotion regulation, struggling with managing the highs and lows. And that's not a biochemical thing. I don't mean, biochemically, we haven't changed as human beings. But I think in a world that feels more chaotic, in a world where they watch things happening that the adults don't quite know what to do about, I think it has led to that. So we have to bring safety and security to these young people. And they're very sophisticated in all sorts of ways, but they still need that safety and security, and they need that structure around them. So we think of that as very important. Obviously, the family and the home is an important place. We do a lot of work with parents about how to bring that kind of structure. You know, it's tempting nowadays to kind of loosen everything up, but actually structure is very helpful for child and adolescent development. And the schools, obviously, are a place that a lot of these kids spend more time than anywhere else. And keeping that structure in a very careful way. I think you guys do a wonderful job. I think what I hear about the school system through the community is positive, and you should be proud of that. But these are things we're all struggling with, and I think there's more as a society we can do. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
We could definitely spend more time.
Trina?
I would just echo Erica's comments. Thank you for all of your hard work to get this program up and running. I think it's invaluable to our community, and I'm sure for the families, it's they appreciate it in ways that can't imagine. My question is, you mentioned it's ARPA. It's been ARPA funded this past year, so I'm just curious about plans going forward, and if you can share, because I think we all would want to see this program continue. And the second part of my question is just ability to scale if it were to grow, and what your thoughts are on that.
Both really great questions. So we've had a lot of discussions recently, because now that we're at the halfway mark and know that we want this to continue, obviously it depends on a financial model. I wish I could say that you could look to the insurance companies to fund this. They just won't, and we knew that going in. So what we've been talking about is a combination of funding sources. So Kevin Moynihan, as first selectman, has been talking to the Board of Finance, where I presented last week, about potential funding sources for a piece of it through New Canaan government, which I think is really generous and important. But that shouldn't cover the whole thing. So Lauren Patterson, as the executive director of the Community Foundation, has promised and worked very closely with Bethany and myself to design fundraising opportunities for various donors in the town, and setting up a special fund within the Community Foundation to do this. So that's going to be another important piece. Silver Hill, as a nonprofit, we set aside funds for this, and so we have helped and will continue to help in terms of devoting some of our resources to this as a way to put back into the community that has been so good to us. Between those three sources, we should have enough. That said, to your second point, I believe that there is opportunity to scale. And that's why we're thinking about having another town join us. We have discussions going with, in particular, Wilton and Darien. They both had been invited to join in the first year. Both of them deferred and said, let's wait and see how it goes. Well, I think it's gone very well. So I believe that one of those towns will agree to join us. There are pros and cons about growing. On the one hand, we don't want to grow too quickly and too large, because I think the danger would be it would outstrip our capacity. We do have capacity, probably could roughly double in size and still maintain the rapid turnaround. More than twice, I'm not sure, and that's why really only one town partner I think would be ideal. But we also want to retain a kind of focus on the values we have. I think both towns, Wilton and Darien, felt like towns that are compatible and similar enough. We know the leadership and we know the school superintendents in those towns who could really join with us, but they haven't made a final decision yet. So what we would say is that we're continuing either way. We're going to find funds to do this. If another town joins, that's great. In order to grow past that, if you're thinking about 3 or 4 more towns, I think there need to be more sites, frankly. And so we're not looking for much larger towns. We're not asking Norwalk or other towns to join with us. That would really need to be a further effort. Would I love to see every town have a service like this someday? Sure. But right now we're focused really quite locally on making this the best service it can be.
And just a couple of numbers. We have had, Darien has had a couple of self-pay, where even though it's of no charge to someone living in New Canaan, someone outside of New Canaan to create equanimity, they can use the program, but they're going to have to pay for it. And that has happened. We have had people outside of New Canaan utilize the program, so.
I have a question related to that. How do people from Darien, for instance, or other places learn about the program, and what have you been doing to get the word out within New Canaan?
It's a great question. So we have not publicized intentionally beyond the borders. People seem to talk, so I can't speak to those
Yeah,
individuals.
New Canaan moms with Darien
Yeah, that's
moms, things like that.
We have a spy in the New Canaan moms.
Yeah, Darien has had much tragedy in terms of completed suicides this past year, and so they have a heightened awareness. And I worked with the Director of Human Services for Darien during some of their tragedies that they had. New Canaan partnered with them, and we were there for social work help if anybody came in. So it is word of mouth, and it's already towns working together amongst each other where the word has gotten out. Human Services and Darien would love to see some type of collaboration, but it also, it's from the top boards such as of ed and council, town council, things like that. So we're patient, we're waiting, but we certainly believe in the program.
And just to add to your piece about how have we gotten the word out, so gradually we've been distributing more and more information. If I'd had the presence of mind, I would have brought, we have these cards that we distribute. We bring them to, obviously Susan has them. We bring them to doctors' offices, to therapists' offices. We got word out on social media. We have access to, we have a website through Silver Hill that's linked to the town's website. But we are looking for more ways to publicize because frankly, I think we do have the capacity to see more folks, and I believe there are more folks out there who we haven't seen yet. So if others have suggestions, please reach out to one of us.
Reach out to Human
and
Services.
we'd be happy to think with you about ways to get the word out.
Quite honestly, that's one of the things we'll do with the play, right? We're going to promote not only this program, but other mental health resources to our audience members, just to get the word out. So it's part of the extension and community outreach that we'll be doing.
Well, and I would
It's a
just
public-
add that if anyone listening or wants to learn more, the website is excellent. I thought it was very detailed, step by step. It has a phone number, contact. So just by typing in New Canaan Urgent Assessment, it'll take you right to the website with a very detailed overview and the process and a phone number.
All right.
So I just had one question. You touched on insurance, like you bill it where possible. Is that something you feel like certain plans actually are doing a better job of, or is it something that if more people knew that some of it could go through their insurance, you might actually get a better, more participation or more referrals?
So the way we designed it, we've been careful to tell people that they don't pay anything regardless of their insurance. You raise an interesting question about whether there are some policies that do better than others. My guess is yes. I haven't looked at that data, but I will tell you that unfortunately these days, virtually all the insurance plans have made it quite difficult to get paid services outside of some very narrow categories. And because an urgent assessment isn't a typical thing, doesn't fit neatly into one of the boxes that the insurance companies cover, we have not had a ton of success getting reimbursed. I don't have the numbers exactly in my mind, but it's something on the order of 10% of the revenue has been recovered through insurance, despite the fact that we bill in every case that we can. So it tells you something about the nature of these claims, which is unfortunate. I would love to see reform in the regulation of the insurance industry, particularly around behavioral health. Some of you may be aware that there is a federal law passed in 2008 for parity, meaning it is illegal for insurance companies to place obstacles in getting mental health care that aren't the same kinds of obstacles you would get for any kind of medical care. And a recent report said that almost universally that law has not been enforced, meaning insurance companies are biased against reimbursing for mental health care as compared to non-mental health care. And it shouldn't be that way. That's a result of stigma. That's a result of what I think is something that we need to change. We actually have an advocacy arm at Silver Hill. We talk to our local politicians. We advocate locally, statewide, and federally to try to change that. And I believe that as our kids, because as you know better than anyone, I imagine, our kids see the future. And as they get older and are more comfortable talking about these things, I think more so than my generation or the generation before me, we're going to see change in society, and I look forward to that.
So I just want to thank you for creating this program. It's an amazing initiative. Obviously, it was a need that's been there for a while, and we've been hearing on the Board of Ed about the increased stress that our students are under for a long time. We've made changes, but this is a wonderful addition to all the tools that we have. I was wondering, actually, it sounds like it just covers people who live in New Canaan, and as you look at scaling the program, I would like at some point in the future, or just have you consider whether or not we could cover the people who work in New Canaan. You know, we've also heard how teachers are under a lot more stress, and I know policemen are under stress. So I just, you know, we want to take care of the entire New Canaan community, but I know it's a question
It's a
of
wonderful
funding.
idea.
brought
Beth,
up.
it has been.
Yeah.
We have
And
to
we're
figure out how to
hoping-
pay for it.
Pardon me?
We have to figure out how to pay for that,
Yeah,
but
we're just
I think it's a
hoping.
wonderful idea.
I know we've asked Dr. Gerber and his staff, could we do this for any less? So the ARPA grant was for $250,000. And I remember Andrew saying, yes, we could do it, but you're not going to get the quality. So they really want to function on that minimum cost to where they can maintain their reputation as mental health professionals and experts and keep the program going at a top level. So
I do want to underline one thing you said, because I think it's so important, is we know something about the level of stress the teachers are under. And again, I think that was true before the pandemic, but I think since the pandemic, it's clear that it's not just the kids, it's the teachers as well. And that's a complicated issue, right? But I think you're correct in pointing that out.
I'd love that to go to anybody working in New Canaan, a part of the community that is considered a part of the community, as far as I'm concerned. People commute a long ways to work in this environment, and I think they deserve the benefits of it as well.
I'm just curious if you could break down the patients that you'd seen over the last 6 months by gender.
It's a great point. It's almost exactly 50-50 now, and it's funny because there's a convention in the mental health world that women and girls are more likely to self-report, that boys sort of for more kind of traditional cultural reasons don't, and that's a problem actually because then they don't get the help they need. Early on, we had more boys than girls, and we still don't know exactly why that was. It did even out over time, though, so now it's almost exactly 50-50. But I think that's a tribute to the school system, because I think you refer both very, very, very mindfully, but I think also to a culture in town. I've been invited to the men's club and to other clubs that are historically mostly male in this town. And I have to say, I've been so impressed by the willingness of the men, too, to be able to talk about mental illness and talk about the need for care. So I'm proud to say, because what we know in the population as a whole is it doesn't discriminate. But we know that people tend to self-report are more female. And so it's nice that we are not seeing that.
Any questions, please feel free to contact Human Services or Silver Hill. There are community outreach people at Silver Hill that I can put you in touch with.
We're on the phone every day, so,
I
and with
know.
Susan, too. So.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
Great. Then we'll go to
Statement of accounts, yep.
Good evening. Wonderful program, unbelievable. Now to the mundane. Through November, 2022, our operating fund expense actual, $32.9 million, or 33% of our full-year budget of $99.1 million. We also have another $57.3 million, or about 58% of the budget, of encumbered funds, mostly comprised of salaries, benefits, and purchase services. And of the purchase services, it's primarily transportation and out-of-district tuition. The remaining balance, $8.8 million, or about 9% of the budget, is unencumbered at this time, and it's primarily made up of spending that is not typically fully encumbered, such as overtime, substitute teachers, stipends, and utilities. The remaining balance, that $8.8 million, is fairly consistent with where we were a year ago, so no issue there. If you flip to page 2 of the package, and this is the attainment analysis chart, again, it shows our current year attainment at 33.2% of budget. That's actuals to budget. That compares, if you go to the left of the chart, that compares to the prior year attainment of 32.4% of full year 22 actuals, which would indicate initially that our spending rate this year appears to be growing about 0.81% higher than last year. However, when we look at the detail by line, you'll see that employee benefits, in terms of the year-to-year growth as well as the dollars, is higher year-to-year, 40.22% this year versus 35.28% last year. So higher by almost 5 points, 5%. In looking into this, it's purely due to a timing difference related to the 3 budget transfers that were made during the spring of last year, but were not ultimately reflected in our full year results until the end of the year. So if you normalize for those 3 transfers for the month of November, it would put our prior year attainment at 40%, which is almost flat year to year in the employee benefits line. And then overall, it would increase the prior year number to 33%, again, which would make us flat year to year. The next package is the status of the ESSER ARP grants. The first slide shows a summary of all 9 COVID-related grants totaling $1.9 million. The 2 biggest grants at the top of the list is the ARP ESSER grant and the ESSER 2, which make up about 80% of the total. Overall, $706,000 of the $1.9 million was spent in full year 22, and we're projecting another $785,000 to be projecting to be spent by the end of this year, which would essentially be which would leave nothing but the ARP ESSER fund, which we would then fully spend about $438K in full year 24. All of the other grants will be fully utilized by the end of this year. And then behind that, I've shown a chart for each of the individual grants. I'm not going to go through each chart, but just as an example, the first chart is the ARP ESSER grant of $1.1 million, which we will have spent $624 by the end of this year. And as I said, the remainder will be spent in full year 24, which is the other $438,000. The majority of the spend in the ARP ESSER grants focused on Achievement Academy, including director, teachers, transportation and supplies, a psychologist, a social worker for family and community connections, kids in crisis counselor, and a SPED teacher. And then the second page is the ESSER 2 grant, which will be fully paid up by the end of this year, spent mostly on custodians, building subs, and Achievement Academy teacher. The remainder of the slides, as I mentioned, a similar snapshot and gives you an indication of how the monies are being utilized. Any questions?
Did anyone have any questions? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
I think we will go to the second read of the budget assumptions and related priorities under action items.
Yes, so you should have in your packet the updated copy of the budget assumptions based on our discussion last time in the meeting. You'll see it's just some language changes primarily. The addition of the SRO and the list of folks involved with CAB and some of those other pieces that the board had shared with us. Although I wasn't able to get a red line, I did share last year's budget assumptions on Friday as well with the board. If you want to do some comparisons, what have you. So glad to take any questions if there are any. Go from there.
Did anyone have any questions or comments? I had a couple. So for goal 1D2, and I think that was consistent with last year's as well, but I was curious if the team structure or any is used anywhere else, like in any different groups, either at the elementary or at the high school, or if this was just exclusively SACs.
Sure. So generally, when we talk about teaming, we're talking about the structure at the middle school.
Okay.
And really, it has to do with their master schedule as well, and the structure of the staff teaming. And so the way it works in fifth grade, it's a 2-person team, and 6, 7, and 8, it's a 4-person team. And the students are scheduled so that they're on the same team and the same group of teachers. So then those teachers meet regularly through the schedule to talk about curriculum, program, kids, all kinds of things. There are elements of teams everywhere across the district, right? So we've got grade level teams, we've got curricular teams at the high school, we have other departments and other teams like that. But when we use the word teaming, we're really, internally, we're talking about that middle school structure.
Great. And then for D4, it looked like we might have just dropped a little bit of language. So I didn't know if we wanted to add after health and well-being of our students, which is I think what we had last year.
Where are you, Dan? I'm sorry.
Which goal? Goal 1D4. Yeah, just a couple lower.
Gotcha.
Because I think we had language in there around start times last year, but we pulled that language out. But I think we dropped the of our students after well-being.
It looks like it says our students later in that line, no?
Providing resources focused on health and well-being further
Oh, okay.
to help our students become and remain healthy in all domains of their lives.
Yeah, or that would work too.
Got it? Okay.
Okay. And then so for D, same goal, 9, and then compared to goal 2, B2, which are both tackling the learning management systems. I just wanted to, so one is I get the first goal is more professional learning, and then it seems like is goal 2, B2, more kind of the actual system.
Correct. So one was around staff learning and building that capacity. Second, under communications, because that's sort of, one's the input for the work around the LMS, the other's the output, the why. Okay. And the why is to improve communication between teacher and student, teacher and home.
Okay. And then goal 4, just to make it consistent with the district, our district goals, I would add healthy to promote a healthy environment for the actual.
Oh, did I miss that?
That's what our district goals say, so I just thought I'd add it.
Sorry.
Goal 4, the very top.
Sure, it says provide an environment, should be provide a healthy environment.
Yeah.
Got it. That was a revision from last time. I missed that, sorry.
No problem. And then for goal 4B3, if I'm correct, let me just confirm, I was going through this earlier. So this is consistent with last year. I guess so this is language that's not really from our district goals. At least I didn't see it. So I guess when it says recognizing the work that is ongoing, I I guess, is that just related to kind of goal 4B above, or just, it's a little
It is.
vague?
Yeah,
Okay.
it is. It's related to the focus or the purpose of trying to continue to strengthen, that's the continuous piece. So
Okay.
understanding that we are, there's momentum and progress being made, so identifying that and then finding opportunities to accelerate where appropriate.
Okay. And then goal,
Thank you. The last word is increases in little 3, that first line. Is anybody else, let me read here. I think it either needs to be increase or increasing, whatever, just a,
I think it's saying, right,
and where appropriate.
you're acknowledging that the work is ongoing and expanding where appropriate, and that doing that increases school and community awareness.
I just, look at it later. I just wasn't 100% sure the grammar on it was up to the level of our other goals.
We will take a look. Glad to take a look.
All right, and then the last comment I had is, I think in goal 5A, I think we moved some stuff around, but I think we have to fix the numbering, because we have 2 1s.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Okay. Can do that.
I didn't have anything else. Penny?
So in a non-substantive but English teacher way as well, I think one word or something got dropped from goal 4A-B. Starting after, in the third line, after the phrase supportive learning environments, where it goes supportive learning environments, welcomes every child. Something was missing. I could offer a change, but again, I'm happy to defer to whatever you want to put in there.
We will be glad to take a look and make sure that the flow is the way it should be. Glad to do that.
Not very substantive. Thank you. I just want to thank the entire team for all their work on this, because it really does set the bedrock of what we build our budget on. And it's extremely thorough and comprehensive, and it's so much work goes into it that it's terrific.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, so can I get a motion, assuming?
Well, we have the motion, it would
Yep.
just be a vote.
Okay,
Yep, because we have the first and second from the first reading.
perfect. So can I get everyone in favor of approving the 2024 budget development goals, budget assumptions, and related priorities? It's unanimous? Great, thank you.
Thank you. Now we can put them in the budget book. Great.
All right. Next up, we have the 2024-2025 second read of the district calendar.
Yes, and you have that in front of you as well. Again, we revised after our conversation earlier. Primarily, it was making sure we had a different color for the half day in the 5th grade on December 2nd. Again, the K4 would still be grades 3 through, or the 3rd through the 6th. We also did move the last day due to the December holiday break because of the way that it falls this year in 24-25. We had talked about, the initial calendar had the 23rd as a half day, and then we recognized that that really wasn't a plan that was going to work anywhere other than on paper. So we'll do the half day on the 20th and go into the break there. The rest remains unchanged from the way that it was shared with the board earlier.
All right, does anyone have any comments or questions or discussion? So I guess, sorry, Julie?
Last time we were discussing the addition of Columbus Day, so maybe we should continue that discussion.
Sure. I guess one thing to note, Dr. Lutze, you shared with us was the, I guess, 2017 through 2027 Columbus Day, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, and just where it, where there was holidays that fell on the weekend, and what the additional day actually would look like. So I don't know if people had a chance to look at that.
Correct, yeah. In our last conversation together, the board had requested a sense of sort of how the 3 days fall and the holidays and the interaction therein. So I thought we'd go back a little bit so 2017 was the most accurate. I'm sure I could have spent more time and found more dates, but thought that would be enough. So 10-year window there. The other thing, we did look back to see when the initial decision was made to begin attending school on that day. And the best information we have is we believe it was 2012 that the board made that decision. So since 2012, we have come to school, on that day. So it's,
Yep.
if that's helpful to know. Okay.
Julie?
How did that come to be in 2012? Was there a public discussion, or was that due to circumstances where maybe school was closed a lot that year or the year prior and we needed to add a day? How did that come about?
Well, it was before I was superintendent, but I can share that we did have storms during those times. There were closings where we may have lost a week of school. I know in the start of the school year, I think it was 2011, 2012, we were closed due to a hurricane that had come. We had some storms on Halloween that had hit a couple of years in a row where we had to essentially cancel Halloween. And the unpredictability of the weather, I think, did play into that. Mm-hmm. The Board of Education at the time, at the superintendent's discussion, as they talked through, made the decision that they would prefer to be in school during that day. And I think so was the board made that decision.
Okay. So was it originally removed because of weather circumstances?
I believe that was certainly a part of it. I can't speak to, was that all of it? Were there more to it? I wasn't privy to the discussion, so I don't know. But I do know that there was stress on the calendar due to unforeseen weather, certainly during that time. And it was earlier in the season. We even had, I believe, a storm at the end of the school year in the spring, and then we had that other one right in the beginning of the school year. And that's, the unpredictability, I think, of some of those patterns.
Being the only one who was here then, I do remember we had some weather events then, but there was also a very thorough discussion about the fact that it would be a holiday that would be celebrated in school, so the holiday was not being ignored at all. It was just one that we would celebrate in school, we weren't canceling it in any way. And it was because there had been year after year a huge amount of pressure on the budget, on the calendar, and when we would start and going too late at the end of the year. And we got a lot of feedback from the teachers at that time that with the number of breaks that we already had in the calendar in September because of the holidays that are there, that it wasn't educationally good to have yet another week that was broken up. I can't remember, I don't have to go back. We had tried other things. We had actually tried having school on election day when it wasn't a federal election, and that failed miserably. So we were not able to play with the calendar that way. I think that was an effort before we did this. So there's always pressure on the calendar. Even if you look at this calendar, where are you going to put the day? We're already starting on August 26th. Now you're not going to want to bring the kids on Friday, August 23rd. So then if you put the day at the end of the year, then you're, instead of ending on June 11th, you're going to be ending on June 12th. So you really only have room for one snow day before you start canceling school, because you're not going to want to have the kids go a whole nother weekend and then come back in for just one Monday, and camps are already starting. So, I mean, it sounds silly, but there is an awful lot of pressure on every single day, and not having a third, it's typically a third holiday in September and October, just took a little of that pressure off. And I remember after we did it, the budget, not say budget, but the calendars that were presented to us, we had far less discussion about them. They just seemed to work out better over the years. So it was not related to any particular weather event, is how I remember it.
So, sorry, how many snow days are baked into this calendar?
Well, none are baked in anymore. We used to do that years ago, but it's a one-for-one. So anytime there's a snow day, you're adding a day on the end, or any cancellation of any kind.
And then we go into spring, we have to start making decisions after a certain time in
Right.
June, right?
So at a point, so Board of Education policy is the last day of the third full week in June. Using this calendar as an example, that only gives you 15 days, because June 2nd is a Monday. So those 15 school days are the first 3 full weeks. If it were to start on a Tuesday, for instance, if Tuesday were June 1st, then you would have 4 additional days, that you could, because it's the third full week. Where was I going with that? Well, so what happens is after that, you hit that part, then we'd have to talk about taking days away from the April break, which we've had to do, I think, twice in my time.
So, but when you say the third full week, that would basically mean there would be you'd have to have more than 7 snow days or days off?
Yeah, so the 20th is.
Right, so-
20th is a hard stop of the 20th. So right now, with this calendar, we're baking in a doomsday scenario of 7 days, right?
This calendar, correct. So under policy, now, I'm not saying people would love that, because the end of the third full week in June is late, as we're saying, and other things. But that's the Board of Education's policy, is that, right, the end of the third full week. And if we do hit that, and there will be, different calendars shape up differently each, as we look at them, that when we have hit that in the past, we've then had to go to April break and take the days back from there, and we've taken, I believe, as many as two of those days back. And that, unfortunately, always comes as a late announcement, because it's only when you're in the storm you have those snow days that you know about them, and those are certainly not very productive educational days for our kids.
And then I guess just a question. So you couldn't, like in the scenario where you were starting to burn through some of these extra days, are we not able to adjust the Friday before the February break? I guess, is it
Sure.
potentially because of either the teacher contract or we don't know all the snow days at that point?
Well, that's actually 2 things. That's one is the Board of Education policy that directs us to have when we have a week's break, where feasible to have the Friday prior to the break off as well, because of travel or other things for families. So we have a policy around that. The other part of that is that's a staff development day. And our staff do 187 days. The kids do 182. So that's the 187th day that our staff would do.
I had a question similar to that. You would not want to have all your professional learning days happen in the fall. Like if we had a scenario where we said, well, Columbus and Indigenous Peoples Day was a professional development, that would mean that you wouldn't then have a professional development day after the end of the.
That's right. There's a cadence to those days. Yeah. So we have data, we're able to assemble our data teams and to look through and to do deep work during those days that then gets used and implemented through the rest of the year. So you don't want to front load into the fall all of your professional learning days. Would be less optimal for our teachers.
Yeah. And also something I'm not sure we talked about with this calendar, correct me if I'm wrong, but Good Friday happens to fall within spring break on this calendar, which does not happen in other years. So is that another reason why this calendar is a little bit more compacted in terms of ending a little earlier in June than we normally see? Because usually that's another thing. In addition to not having 2 Jewish holidays in the fall, we also don't have Good Friday.
That's correct. Jen, Easter is late this year in 2025. And you wouldn't want to wait for April break to be the week of the 21st, which is why it's there in the 3rd week. But generally it's Good Friday that then leads into the break for folks, which I prefer, and I think everyone prefers. This year doesn't work set up that way.
Right. It's just interesting that that's another reason why this particular year, this particular calendar happens to be a little bit more compacted than we normally see, where we don't have those
Yep.
2 days that we would have otherwise.
Penny?
Brian, do you remember, I know we've studied, I've heard reports on it in the past, typically how many snow days we have? I mean, it actually, we always get them. Sometimes they're weather days in the fall, and it's sort of been remarkably consistent over the years.
It has, although, I had some students really hoping for one a week ago, and sent me emails. But generally, it can, well, you say it's been remarkably consistent. It's been pretty consistent, but we do have those storms that come in that are
Right.
really unpredictable. And if a few trees come down that knock out some power lines, close some roads, we get stuck, and it can be some time. The larger storms that we've had, and we've been fortunate in the last couple of years, knock on wood, but they can put us out for 3 to 5 days at a clip, right? But generally, between 3-4 snow days is generally what I anticipate as we go through the course of a school year. And this last year was an anomaly a bit. The weather was a little different. If you remember, we really didn't have snow days. We had ice days that set up and things that we had to work around. But usually 3 to 5 is what I anticipate.
Julie?
So I appreciate the weather aspect to all of this, but I do think there's an element of cancel culture behind Columbus Day. And it's important to some people, and I think we should be inclusive of that in our calendar.
So I'm wondering, I'd love to explore, can we make it inclusive in school? Like, is there a way to do it? And, given that we do have Veterans Day where we are able to meaningfully address the subject while also continuing the cadence of having the kids in school. And I don't know, and I feel a little bit at a disadvantage of not knowing exactly how we've done it in past years, but is there a way to value the holiday and value Indigenous Peoples' Day and have that conversation and do it in the context of our schools and education?
I think the answer to that is yes, because it's what we do now. It's what we've done for many years, and it's what we do with Veterans Day. And it works out really well, and I think it's actually, probably providing a lot more to our kids to be in school and learn, rather than just have another day off at home where they're probably, many of them at least, maybe most of them are not actually learning about Columbus Day or Veterans Day if they were home for Veterans Day. So I think we are doing that, and I think that actually does value the holiday.
Katrina?
I guess my perspective on this, because we haven't honored it in a long time, and we've done it in school instead. But I think, from our board's perspective, we need to, at least our focus should be around what's best for the students and the learning and the cadence of the year. And as I was thinking about this a little bit today, I think we have to consider too, like, what do we lose if we bring the day back and it's another lost day in October? And I think there are, other consequences beyond the student day and learning and teachers. It's, it's a lost day of game contests for athletics. It's a lost day of practice for the plays. There's all these things that happen in a really busy time of year, and it's the first quarter of the school year. So my thought is that, I view the best opportunity for students is to, allow, especially like our kindergartners and our fifth graders and our freshmen who are starting new schools, to develop that routine and that cadence that October usually offers. And I think it's a good time, for that routine to kick in. So, and I think Durg A, most of the schools around us do not have it as a day off, which I think is an important consideration. So.
So, one thing I would say is kind of looking at the kind of forward calendar of Columbus Day, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, I thought it was interesting that, for 2023, only one of the Jewish holidays is on a weekday. Same thing in 2024. They actually flipped. And so 2025 was the first in a couple years where you'd have, Yom Kippur is on a Thursday, Rosh Hashanah is on a Tuesday, and then Monday, October 13th, would be Columbus Day. And then 26 and 27 are another period where you've only got one, so the calendar's a little less crowded. Interestingly enough, I thought 2027 was, both Yom Kippur and Columbus Day are on October 11th, so there's like a little double celebration there, which would be good. So I felt looking at that, like just the logistics of it wasn't too problematic if we wanted to have the Columbus Day Monday added to the calendar. And it felt like of the 11 dates that we sent, I think it was 2 Jewish holidays were weekdays 5 times, and 6 times we only had 1. So some years might be a little more crowded or not if we were to consider it, but it didn't feel like it was something that was insurmountable.
With regards to Veterans Day, we do an awesome job with Veterans Day and their whole school assemblies, where the grades come together in the cafeteria or the auditorium. But thank you for sending me the guidelines, Jill. It looks like it's done more based on per class, and it might be discussed in a morning meeting or incorporated in a lesson, less so as a whole school celebration. And that's another reason why I feel like it's important to have the day off. I really, at my core, I feel like it comes down to a cancel culture. There are statues being torn down of Columbus all over, and I think it's a shame. It's our history, and I think, good or bad, we need to learn from our history. So I feel strongly about adding it to our calendar.
Penny.
So I would just want to say that I think that I would certainly be open to discussion with the administration on different ways to celebrate it in school, but in my experience on this board, the true north of this board has always been not what was in the best interest of the parents, but what was in the best interest educationally of the children. And we have heard over and over again from our teachers and from the administration that this day in October is a much more valuable learning day than adding a day in June. Or what can end up happening is just canceling another day of school. So I think that when you look at that and you say, what is the purpose of this board? It is to give the best educational experience that we can to the 4,300 students that come in these doors every day. And I think keeping this as a school day helps to do that. But we can definitely discuss if we feel like we're not honoring it as a board the appropriate way. We can ask for discussions on how to do that better. But I think that there's no teacher or no administrator that I've heard of that says that the day at the end of the year in June is equal educationally to this Monday in October.
I agree with everything that Penny said. I just think if we really want to focus on this particular, holiday and educating kids and valuing that holiday, then we can talk about how to do that. The way to do that is not to take the day off. I think that's actually the opposite. We could make the day more valuable for our kids, and really teach them about history in a more meaningful way and systematic way if we want to do that as a board. But that's the way to value it, not just taking the day off.
I've given a lot of thought to this over the last year and certainly over the last couple of weeks. And Julie's used the term celebration a few times. And I think that, to me, as I think through it, and I go back and forth, and Erica talked about it, and I talked about it today, and I think there's that day is very, very important to a lot of communities around the country. I don't know that, for me, this has never been about adding a day or a day off. I never found that argument to be particularly compelling for me personally, because I agree that our kids are here to learn and get educated. I think Veterans Day is a little bit different. I mean, if we're talking about purely education, there's a number of days off that I know we can't necessarily control, but that, I'd argue are not necessary for education. I mean, everything from New Year's Day to, like, there's other days in here that we could argue are not necessary. And I just think that Columbus Day has always been I think it's an important day in American history. Again, taking the good, the bad, and some of the ugly, but for a lot of communities, it is a really important day, and it is a day of celebration. And I think that's, to me, where is the slight difference between being able to just educate on what that history is about in the school day versus a family that would actually celebrate that.
Well, I just want to say, I do think that if this board decides to change it, that they have to realize the burden they're putting on a number of dual working parents in this district who don't get the day off, because not all corporations give it. Many don't. I didn't do a survey. And it's going to be, we're adding a burden to a significant portion of the people that live in New Canaan by making this, if this board decides to make it a holiday again.
I just want to add, just in that same vein, if the decision is made to do that, then I think it should be every year. I don't think this should be up in the air for families so that they have to plan. So one way or the other, I think that, it's been this way for, I guess, about 10, 11, 12 years. So if there's a change is made, I think it's sort of decisions we make now are for this question and for, the future, at least the near-term future, so people can plan.
Just to say, when we did it in 2012, I don't recall anybody ever coming back and getting negative feedback. That was reported back to the board. I could be wrong on that, but that's, tell me if anybody else does, but I don't remember any negative feedback from anybody in the community. And I did get some people saying it was a relief that they no longer had to cover that day because it was very difficult.
But in fairness, it was also done sort of quietly. Had it been done more transparently and maybe more people sort of knew about it in time, maybe that feedback would have been different. Maybe more people would have been aware. I don't know. I'm just saying it wasn't.
I dispute that just because I think we followed the exact same procedure that we're following now.
Oh, we did? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, it was a discussion. We determined. We had a second read. We decided. We asked for public comment. I think I actually remember saying, if people are going to care about this, come and tell us about it at that time.
Okay.
So it wasn't weather, or was it weather, like in that year? Sorry.
Penny was there, so listen to Penny.
It was not, we had, I would have to go back. We had some bad weather years. We've had some bad weather experiences before. But we always had, you can look at this schedule right now, and you realize that people, you can say, all right, we're going to make June 12th the last day. I don't think anybody on this board is going to vote. Like, look at this. If somebody makes the motion, it should be a dual motion. Like, what day are you adding? Because I don't think anybody's going to want to say we're going to bring the kids in on the 23rd, because we're already starting on the 26th, right? So you're not going to want to do that.
No, that's not an option. We're talking about just adding one day at the end.
You're talking about adding one day at the end. So then we're going to end up, if the first snow day, we're going to have, it's going to go to the 13th. And then you're going to be into the third week. And, then I think what's going to end up is you're going to be more apt to cancel a day, because we build in 2 extra days than to actually go into the third week. Because what we have had is, in the past, is we have, parents that look at the schedule that we hand out. They're usually 2 days at the end. They think, all right, those are my snow days, and then I know they cancel, and then I know they go into April. So I'm going to plan for the first camp for my child to start the 16th. And we get that every year. And then we do this, and then you're going to be faced with, do we cancel or don't? I think you're sort of losing an educational day by adding this back in.
I just wanted to remind everybody that we do vote for the calendar 2 years in advance. So when the decision was made about Columbus Day, it was a discussion similar to what happens here. So the conversation about the the calendar always goes to the board for a first read, always goes to the board for a second read. And there has been time where it's been heavily debated, because there was a time period where we actually decided to have March break. And there was a time period where the district would say, we're going to do 1 year where it's a week in February and a week in April. And then the next year, we're going to do a week in March. And then we're going to go back to the following year and do an April and a February break. And then we got so many complaints that the board then created their policy, which then said, we will have 1 full week in February, 1 full week in April, and we're going to do everything in our power to end the 3rd week in June. So there is a lot of history about the conversations of the calendar. So I just bring that up because the decisions are always made 2 years in advance, and it always has been a big conversation with the board, and there is time period in between for public to comment. Sometimes we've had the teachers union that has come forward to talk about the calendar, especially when it was really heated about whether we go to a March break or a February break or an April break. So I'm just giving you a little historical perspective.
Yeah. Oh.
Katrina?
I would just say, in my time on the board, probably the question I've gotten most frequently, starting in February every year, is when is the last day of school? Because it becomes the game of, I know we post it on the calendar, but it gets confusing and people just want to know and start making their plans for summer. And I think as soon as you wrap to that 3rd week, people start to get stressed out about summer plans and vacations. We have to make a decision in March about graduation. So there's a lot of travel plans that are hanging in the balance for people trying to, figure out when graduation might be. Is it going to be the week before, the week after? So weather does, all of that history is important, but weather does play a pretty big role year to year, and it can impact, that I think we try not to go to that next week, and sometimes we do, but you eat into as little of it as possible. So I think it is an important factor, and it's something that is completely out of our control. And we have terrible weather here, whether it's ice, snow, and electrical, and all of the above.
So I know that we don't know what exactly would happen, but if we did end up on beyond June 13th, and we were looking at June 16th then as being the next day we would have to go to school, would we alternatively consider taking away from April break at that point, or we wouldn't? It would go into that 3rd week. That is the policy.
So my thought is I kind of agree with Julie and Hugo, though. I feel like as a district, we do an excellent job with Veterans Day, and I feel like it is a great educational experience for the kids. I think it's something that really celebrates the day. I know there's some stuff that kind of the kids are picking up on Columbus Day, but my admittedly not as nuanced read as you, Dr. Correnti, is it doesn't have the same kind of feel and celebration. There's some educational aspects, but it seems more teacher specific or subject specific, and a little bit less of the, I think, educational celebration that you might want or people would expect, which leads me to believe, and I don't think that's an indictment of the district at all. I think it's just the nature of maybe of the holiday and of I think some of the great work we've done on Veterans Day, but it does lead me to kind of want to really strongly consider adding it as a holiday, so that I think that highlights somewhat, I think, the importance to the district of that day off, and almost a little bit more of a forum for them for the school to discuss it. But I do think it goes a long way for the communities that this is a super important holiday for, and I think it kind of shows a little bit of a stronger support of it, which I think is a positive.
I still wonder if there's a way to change the format. If it doesn't have to be the same as Veterans Day. If we feel like Veterans Day is not the appropriate forum, the appropriate way to honor Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day, like, let's talk about how to change it. I mean, I would love to have that conversation.
Well, in order to talk about how to change it, we have to know what it is, you know, in its existing form, and I don't think any of us, I mean, Brendan seems to, he kind of says that we're already doing that. We may be, I don't know. But I just don't know. So changing, I don't know what we'd be changing because I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. So do we want to learn more then?
Sure. Always.
I almost think that would make things, I totally appreciate where you're going with that, but I think that might make things more difficult because there are varying opinions about Columbus. So I think that could get a little messy. And I think it's a cultural holiday, and let's have it off and let families celebrate it as they wish.
So I guess the question for the board is, do people want to try and kind of get through the second read today and come to either an agreement or not, or do people want to maybe have some follow-ups and we can, at the next meeting, talk more about kind of what we do as a district and whether we think that's a better path or it's a better path to consider trying to have it as a holiday. And I do agree with Dr. Lutzy. I think the goal would, nothing's ever permanent, but the goal would be that it would be whichever route we go, it would be something that would be consistent year to year as part of the target and not have it be fluctuating every year as a topic. Because I'm sensing that we're relatively evenly kind of split, so I'm trying to understand if people think more discussion or having some follow-ups between now and maybe the next meeting would be beneficial or not.
I'm comfortable with moving ahead.
Whatever you all think.
It's an agenda item, so.
Well, it looks like if I'm reading board, we're split 4-4.
That's my read as well.
I think what the procedure would be, someone would make a motion, it would get seconded, we would vote, it wouldn't pass. That's sort of where we are tonight.
I think that's right. So does somebody want to make a motion so we can at least get to that stage?
I will make a motion to add Columbus Day to the calendar for 24-25.
Is there a second? Hugo. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, 4-4. So what I would suggest then is I think we would likely not have enough votes to pass the calendar as is as a second read based on that discussion. So I think we should discuss and maybe we talk with the executive committee about would there be some benefit to a follow-up discussion on kind of what we do for the next meeting, and then we'll see if we could approve a calendar, a second read of the calendar at the next meeting.
Sure. And if there's any information that the board would like, that would be helpful in that discussion or for that decision, just let me know and we'll get it together.
I do think if we had the snow weather days, if there was a way to get a history of that might be a little bit helpful data.
Sure. See what I can find.
So, okay, so I think with that, we will move on to the committee charters. The first up is the Communications Standing Committee Charter, first read.
Okay, so each of both the Communications Committee and the Resources Committee met this past week. I can turn it over to the chair of the committee, Julie, to talk a little bit. As you know, we've had special committees for the past year, according to Board of Ed bylaws. After a year, special committee moves to a standing committee for a duration up to 3 years. So both the communications and the resources are prepared to present for a first read their charter that would move them from a special to a standing.
Am I presenting the charter, or am I presenting kind of what we've done over the past year?
I think what we've done over the past year.
Okay, perfect. So over the past year, we have been working on a bunch of exciting things. I'm sure you've all seen the new website roll out. Been getting great feedback, and Michelle is a total rock star, and she has done a great job, and she is making adjustments as they pop up, listening to feedback. Some things on the horizon are board docs should hopefully be up and running soon. There is going to be an app launched, hopefully in early 2023. Some of the things on the app are going to include a rotation schedule, the lunch menu, school closings, a staff directory, and a news feed. So hopefully that'll make everything a little easier for parents. And we're looking into doing a start time survey. I think we can all agree that start times has been a huge success. And we want to get feedback from the parent community. So we're looking into the best tool to do so.
Great. So the charter is presented for a first read. There really are very few changes in the charter itself. It's simply the revision history was shifted down. So today would just be for the first reading. And again, the duration would be 3 years from the second reading, so that would be 2026 in the calendar, the year after the calendar we've been discussing. And you see the charge of the Communications Committee remains the same, enhancing the board's internal and external means of communications to increase awareness around the community, around the work that is going on in the schools. The deliverables, and since we began this committee and focusing really on this work, Michelle joined us since then, so it's really been very helpful in accelerating some of the deliverables around the website, working with the PTCs, the PFA to identify needs and opportunities. And as you see there, it's learning from others, learning best practices from other boards and other places to implement those best practices where appropriate for the benefit of our district. So, and membership of the committee currently is Julie, Erica, and Phil. I'm sorry, Phil.
Phil. Yep.
Trying to make eye contact on it. So we just want it for a first reading.
Yep. So I only had one question, is under scope and composition, where we serve for one calendar year from the appointment. Since we're kind of getting to these later, would it be better to do that annually in November after each chair election? Or is it, because if we get farther ahead, it just might not sync up time-wise. I don't really have a preference one way or the other, I'm just not sure. If this rolls, because this wouldn't roll until what, January, right?
Mm-hmm. But that's the maximum duration, so you could always shift the time that the committees would be electing.
Or the
chairs.
composition?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, could always do that.
That's fine. All right, so can I get a motion to accept the Communications BOE Standing Committee Charter for a first read? Brendan? Second, Hugo?
Great, and on to resources.
Yep, resources.
All right. Over the years, the Resources Committee has done, as I'd say, relatively consistent work, reviewing the statement of accounts on a monthly basis, looking at enrollment, looking at facilities use and rental rates, looking at food service from time to time. Definitely spent a lot of time on insurance costs, working with the Director of Finance and with Joe. And then also, as it relates to contracting, so for solar, for buses, essentially, acting as a sounding board before entering into those negotiations and structuring. And then also, I'd say probably, overall, maybe 30 or 40% of the time has been during the budget process, and a little bit off cycle, working with other town bodies, communicating our views on the budget, trying to answer questions, doing joint meetings with, liaisons from those boards and committees. So it's been good work, and I'm sure we'll be busy again this year.
Can I get a motion to approve the Resources BOE Standing Committee charter for a first read? Julie, second. Katrina? All right. All right, so we can go to comments from the public. We don't have any. So announcements and future business.
Great. Well, keep these short as well. Just that January 9th, upon our return, we will have our superintendent's budget presentation. So we can be assured of two things. One, that we will have our budget presentation, and two, Clemson will not be in the national championship that night. So we'll have all the time we need to go through both our operating and our capital budgets together. And just to, of course, take a moment to wish everyone just the very happiest of holidays. Very safe New Year. We hope that everyone has a chance to get away, to take a break from the pressures of our typical days, and to spend time with family and friends and do some things that they enjoy. So we look forward to, it's hard to believe, 2023, next time that we are together as a board. And look forward to seeing you, and wish you all a very happy New Year. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn? Penny, second. Brendan, all in favor? All right, thank you.